morning, Kay.
Hi Tracy, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Really good, really good. Yeah, very
Good.
busy and very good. Lots of
Excellent.
sunshine. We like sunshine.
And it's Friday.
And
Yeah.
it's Friday. So, what have you been up to?
Oh, I've had quite a busy week horse-wise, actually,
Oh,
which has been fabulous. I actually decided at the beginning of the week that I had room for a little bit more work, and boy, has it arrived.
oh wow. What
I
kind of
just
work? What do you mean?
I just said work. I wasn't specific, and that's all I kind of put out there, all I asked for. And what's come in is just brilliant work with horses and people with their horses,
Mm.
which I'm just delighted about. It's really exciting.
Oh, are you talking about like coaching therapy kind of work with horses, with people using horses, or
It's
riding?
it's a mixture. It's a mixture. Although even when I'm teaching people to ride, um, there's a huge amount of personal coaching going on in there as well,
Mm.
um, because the horses so often reflect the, the rider.
Mm.
And there is so much about how the person rides that reflects who they are in life outside of horses. So it's fascinating to be able to have conversations with them and almost help them get insights about their own selves through the way that they ride.
That makes a huge amount of sense to me. I often use the metaphor in training sessions about the rider being the conscious mind, but the horse being the unconscious mind.
Yeah,
And when there's an alignment, there's beautiful action. But when there's dissonance, then there's a bit of crazy chaos because, of course, the horse, e.g., the unconscious mind, is really powerful.
absolutely. Yeah, and helping people to harness that is a major part of my work, even when what they think they're doing is preparing for their next 3-day event competition. Um, and really interestingly, I had a conversation with a chap yesterday who is very, very new to riding, and his whole approach was, I'm going to be in control and I'm going to dominate this horse and I'm going to tell it what to do and I'm going to tell it off when it doesn't do what I want it to do, and really a dominant approach. And just through the conversation, the light bulbs that went on for him around, actually, wouldn't it be better if this was more of a partnership, and that actually the horse is willing to work with you? Let's try the approach where we work with the horse rather than telling it what to do. And the change in his riding was just incredible. It was that's going to stick with me for a long time.
I really like that. I think that's often one of our hardest tasks is to get people thinking around how to build a partnership with their whole brain rather than, as you say, try and dominate it or ignore it or, um,
I
you know,
agree,
set
and
it.
I really like the way that you describe the brain in Happy Brain, because it makes it feel possible. And I think so often in any kind of therapeutic, in inverted commas, in its broadest sense, environment, the challenge is often about, you know, controlling our emotions and our feelings, and getting them under control, and all of those sorts of descriptions, sorts of life.
Oops, I think you've dropped out there, Tracy. Hello? You've dropped out, Tracy. Tracy?
I'm still here. Hello.
We dropped out completely there.
Oh,
Such is technology. I heard you say something about, you said, the business of control, the concept of control.
About how you describe the brain in Happy Brain. Did you get all that bit?
The beginning of it, yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying was that I really like the way that you describe the triune brain in Happy Brain, because it emphasises the idea of all three parts of it working together, rather than what I think we're so often encouraged to do, which is use the thinking brain to manage and control and overcome, and all of those quite hard sort of descriptors.
It's funny, this week actually I've been giving a bit of thought to something, an article I think I saw maybe on Facebook or some social media, but it prompted a whole train of thought in my mind around what's the purpose of language, and which distinguishes us from the animal world. And in Happy Brain speak, that's the prefrontal cortex, the thinking mind. What is its purpose? And I started to think about, the lower parts of the brain, the reptilian brain, the emotional brain, and all of that electricity and chemicals that are being produced to give out information into the world. And of course, what language can do is it can distract people from something very primitive that is happening. So so I'm wondering if there's some kind of protection mechanism. I can distract you with language, so I can try to persuade you to think differently of me by using language. But if you're attuned, you will be knowing my state and all of those non-verbal communication factors, and take that into consideration, as well as the language, which of course we do as coaches and therapists. And I think that's the same with around animals, isn't it? Their first filter is nothing to do with language. Their first filter of us is, what is the energy that we are exuding, and that's what they read first and foremost, that will enable them to feel safe or threatened around us. And I wonder if somewhere in the evolution of man and language, whether we have become quite disconnected from those primitive parts of the brain, which of course we look at in Happy Brain training.
I would agree with you, and I think animals retain it, which is one of the beauties of working around animals, because they give you, especially horses, I guess that's just because I'm most familiar with horses, because they give you that immediate feedback with no filter, because their world is about survival, food, shelter, and they're very, very in tune with, if they're not getting survival, food and shelter, you get nothing else from them whatsoever. They don't hide that at all. And actually I was thinking the other day as well about what it is that horses or not necessarily horses, but animals and children have in common. And there's definitely something for children about being closer to those basic needs. Maybe they don't have the layers of social norms perhaps that we layer on top as a grown-up, and not just in evolutionary terms, but simply in terms of the very fact of aging and making your way through the world. I think almost encourages us to disconnect, as you've described it, to ignore, to it's kind of not okay to do those things. Whereas with animals, they don't have that. Pretty much. They don't really care whether you're, or how you feel about if they need to run away from something. That's just what they do.
I had an inquiry from some new parents of a youngster.
Okay, you've gone ever so quiet. I can hardly hear you.
Let's try again. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay. I had
there you go. Better.
an inquiry recently from parents of new parents of a youngster, and the youngster is now, I don't know, about 20 coming up 2 years anyway, and beginning what I think is fondly referred to as the terrible twos. And the agonising of the parents, with great intention to be the best possible parents they can be, was how to use language, positive language, that the child would respond to and move them through the big emotional outbursts. And it made me smile a little bit and chuckle, because of course we as grown-ups, we value language so greatly, but little ones, particularly at that age, just like animals, they are still in their animal brains. And they are, you can say to a child no in any number of ways. The word isn't what makes the difference, but the energy behind it is what makes the difference. And so that's no, or what, or all those different emotional states we can put behind a simple word like no. And the small child is reading the energy behind it. So if the parent is saying no with great anxiety, the child's survival response is, oh my goodness, there is a stress in my parent's energy system. Therefore, I need to be stressed. Or therefore, I'm building a power base because look what I can do to that grown up. And these are all non-conscious survival mechanisms. I think they're really, really interesting. And I often, in that situation, I was inviting the parents to think about a different way of communicating through song, through rhythm, through movement, through distraction, but always looking at their own emotional state first and being clear what the non-linguistic communication is. And I find that quite a tricky one to communicate, because in most general terms, adults, we prize language so greatly, and that stress in finding the right words actually creates a stress which stresses the unconscious mind of the child. I think I was thinking about I use my dogs quite often when I'm working with kids, particularly Oscar the therapy dog, and it's getting kids, particularly the children who struggle a bit with communication, maybe on the ASD spectrum, to just get the dog to sit down. Just give it a simple instruction. You get Oscar to sit, and let's experiment with all the different ways. You can say sit or sit, or but what's the thought behind sit? Are you imagining the dog sitting, or are you imagining the dog ignoring you? So you go all these kind of experiments to see which gives the strongest, most congruent instruction that the dog will follow. And the dog isn't, again, listening to the language. It is just entirely focused on the strongest, most, the safest, ultimately, instruction from a caregiver.
I often see people when they're riding, and one of the things that people seem quite reluctant to do is to use their voice when they're riding, and yet it can be such a powerful aid to communicating with the horse. You imagine if you're on a horse, you have so many different ways of communicating, not just through the reins and the leg that says go, but where your body weight is, all of that sort of stuff, but your intention. And I think when people, I've seen it happen so many times when clients understand how powerful their intention can be, it makes quite a big difference. And I often say that if they want their horse to go or stop, as long as their intention and their intonation in their voice is congruent, what they actually say doesn't matter at all. So if they want the horse to go, they could say walk on and be quite upbeat and say the words walk on, or they could say sausages, and the word itself actually doesn't make a huge amount of difference. The horse hears the come on, let's go. And similarly, wanting to slow down, if people can't find the right words to say, just anything in a voice that allows you to just breathe out will help. And I think you can take that anywhere. Kind of outside animals, and being really conscious of how you are, it is such a powerful thing to be able to do. And in NLP terms, managing your own state, kind of using it on purpose and being in charge of your own self is such a good thing to do.
And it reminds us, doesn't it, the NLP assumption that intention sets direction. And I think certainly when I came into the NLP world, whenever that was, quite a while ago, that it's easy to grasp that and go, yeah, I know what that means. But when you really, really get into it in a deeper level, what is intention? Of course, it's the words and the pictures, the sounds that we have inside our minds. That it's the non-verbal communication, either directing us towards. I often give the example of going. Actually, I was thinking about Stepney Bank Stables and riding in the arena in there, and that's the visualization I have in my mind when I'm talking people through this. So I arrive into the arena and I'm on the horse and I'm in charge, and if I look to the left and I think very clearly that's where we're heading, and I see myself going ahead of time, and the horse and I will go in that direction, it's really simple. But if I look to the right and say to myself, I don't want to go into that corner because last time I went into that corner I nearly fell off, well, my attention is separated. And then what is my intention? It is fragmented, as to I know what I don't want to go, where I don't want to be. I want to be away from something, and at the same time I kind of want to go towards something. But there are a lot of mixed messages to myself and also to the horse. And so you know well better than me how that just creates immobilization, doesn't it? And
then what a lot of people would do is, the horse is saying, help, I'm not quite sure what to do here, because they're getting all of those mixed messages, that's often seen as naughty behaviour, and it's the horse that gets told off. And I wonder how often that happens with youngsters as well, where they're told that's not an appropriate response, when actually it really was an appropriate response to what was actually happening, not what the grown-up necessarily thought they were saying or doing.
I think that's absolutely bang on, and as you know, in happy brain training, it's really important to sort of persuade parents to, or coaches or therapists or whatever, but just jump inside that brain for a moment. Jump inside the really primitive parts of the brain. You know, what actually is happening there? How is the brain trying to do its very, very best, not knowing what to do next? Can create a big stress reaction, and then when we get a stress reaction, the thinking mind really goes offline. And what's the mental map? What do we know from past experience? What do we want to work towards or away from? What are the physical sensations? Just getting that information is really powerful, rather than what I think we find with parents is they're trying to think through a problem logically using the thinking mind, which very often is offline. Reminds me, I had recently somebody was asking me a question in a training session about their, I think, 5 or 6 year old who at bath time was just having a regular meltdown, and the parents were really desperately trying to negotiate with the child and reason with it and get it to see logic. You know, you must have this bath. The bath is important to you. It's about your hygiene. You don't want to smell, do you? You know, and all of those good reasonings. But of course, the child in meltdown mode is not able to respond with language. And the more the language is not having an effect on the child's behaviour, the more the parents then began to get agitated, which further created stress in the child's system, and then created stress between the parents because they were toing and froing over whose strategy was the most useful one. And the whole room gets filled with stress, and just compounds what the child was experiencing in the first place. And breaking that is, as we know, it comes back to self-management of state first, and also a different way of communication, which, sometimes a good pattern interrupt is, let's sing it. Let's sing that problem. I want you to have a bath. No, I can't sing for Toffee, but it doesn't matter. It's changing the song, because I think what you and I are both agreeing on is when the words and the music mismatch, that dissonance creates a problem within the whole brain and behaviours. And so if you can't change the words and the words aren't working, then we have to change the music. And what's the fastest way to do that?
And do you find that the more skilled somebody is at managing their own state, I suppose, taking that upstream a little bit more skilled at recognising their own state, they become faster at managing it and being able to drop into a more helpful state?
Yeah, that's a huge can of worms, and would be one to discuss in more depth another time. Essentially, I think the first thing we need to get people aware of through our happy brain training is your body is producing chemicals and electricity all the time for many reasons. We are designed to be able to deal with the saber-toothed tiger coming around the corner, which we'll either try and fight or will run from or hide from. Our bodies are amazingly adaptive and resilient, and we have this power surge of electricity and chemicals to help us to move. What I see a lot of is people not realizing that the chemistry is designed biologically to be useful. And so they don't like the sensations, and then they label the sensations as anxiety or panic or whatever it might be, and then they fear the sensations, and then they fearing the sensations, and everything builds up. And so somewhere in trying to answer your question, we have to look at the people who respond best to all sorts of traumas and dramas in life are the ones that work with their own nature and restore and reset quickly and easily after the stress has passed, without applying any great label or meaning to it, and just accepting the way that their bodies can and do respond. The people who don't manage their state so well seem to me to be the ones who are anticipating, so therefore setting up the stress ahead of time, which is, to do with an undisciplined thinking mind or an untrained thinking mind. So there's the anticipation, or there is the inability to reset after the drama, the stress. And in order to not reset, people have to be involved in a continuing dialogue inside their minds. That shouldn't have happened. What if that happens again? And make the pictures scary and cycling round and continuing to cycle around all of that stress chemistry. So resilience is a big word in my work, and I know in your work too. And it seems to me that, yes, the more people practice being aligned with their own neurobiology and trust it and work with it, the easier the reset. And the parallel in the animal world is, my dog walks down the street and can pass 10 dogs and he's really happy and he's fine, and then suddenly out of nowhere he'll have a stress response for no apparent reason to another dog, and he'll have his moment of aggression or defense or whatever it might be, and then of course he just shakes off all of that energy, because it needs, all that stress energy is designed to power him towards aggression, towards fighting, or to run away, and he just will shake it off, and then it's gone, and then he's back to normal again. And when we can do that ourselves, it is one of the most empowering moments, except if there is a benefit to holding on to the story of the drama, then we might want to keep recycling it. And by the time you've told 20 people the story of your drama, you've recycled that stress chemistry 20 times, and then it grows to be even stronger and bigger inside the brain and much harder to then remove. There's something in there about getting people into to work more with nature, and I think that we can reset, and if we don't reset our states, then again, I suppose there's a reference. You can only reset your state to something that you've done before. So if you only ever practice stress states, then that will be your reset. And if you only ever practice Zen states, well, that also will be your reset. Neither of them is as nature designed. We're supposed to do both. And in happy brain terms, we talk about the survival brain or the thrive brain. Both are really important to us. But we are designed to oscillate in and out of many different states throughout the day, and then reset and carry on.
And I like that concept of the reset. That's kind of the reset button almost, and it kind of gets me thinking about what becomes acceptable and unacceptable in broader terms in our environment, and if we feel that it is unacceptable to demonstrate our emotional response to something, then I think as human beings we adapt so quickly to not okay, so it's not okay to show my emotions in that way, so I'll just not do it anymore. And we become kind of trained, if you like, into that kind of thinking. And if we live in an environment where there is perhaps chaos, or if there's some kind of if I use the word dysfunction, I don't know if that's appropriate, but kind of in the context, in the house, in the family, in the work, in the wherever it is, then that becomes the norm, and our response to that becomes the norm. So even when we leave that environment, that is our norm. And I think using something like Happy Brain is a great way of observing that, noticing it, and then being able to decide whether actually a reset to something else is perhaps a better way of doing things, a more resourceful way of doing things.
I think that's right, Tracy, and I think also that the next question is how to do the reset, and this is the crux of our work, is teaching people how. And there are many routes to that, and one of them is inside the emotional brain, is to be able to express self. And as you just described, when the social norm says do not express your emotional self, then suppression of that can cause problems. Equally, too much expression or repeated expression causes harm also. And so we have to find a middle way of, I think kind of currently in society there's been a swing from absolutely no expression of emotion, the stiff upper lip of the British stereotype, to, hey, let's talk about your feelings anytime you want. We're here for you. Just keep talking about your feelings. And again, that's the pendulum swings both ways, but neither end of that spectrum is really healthful. What is good for us is to be able to know when it's appropriate to express our emotional self, and when it's appropriate to not express it. And the purpose of expressing it is quite literally to let it go. But if there is a value to expressing it, so you get lots and lots of attention and lots of good feelings, because suddenly you can get people to care for you, or whatever myriad of benefits socially, then the expression of emotional self habituates for other reasons, the original reason kind of gets lost, which is, again, it's let's express that, and then let's do something with that feeling that converts it into a more powerful good feeling, rather than express it and get the good feeling from the outside world.
Yes, and in actual fact, I've seen that this week. Obviously, I can't share the detail of the young girl who has a particular way of expressing her hurt, and the response that she gets from doing that reinforces that it's an okay thing to do, because that is one of the only ways that she gets that kind of support, and that's led her into a very difficult cycle of behaviour, and not a healthy one either. So it is quite easy, I think, to see that being created. On the other hand, of course, it is kind of the other side of that coin is knowing that we can easily do something else, with the right support and understanding and all of those sorts of things. And I think that's kind of what gives me optimism and hope. That work, like Happy Brain can actually have such a powerful effect like that.
And of course, Happy Brain, what Happy Brain is about is really introducing NLP tools, because those tools make powerful change quickly and very concisely. It's interesting with your example there, because a counter example of the same process for me was working with a mum of a 5-year-old who was having temper tantrums, and the mum was saying, "This is socially unacceptable. You will not do that. You must control that." And so she brought the child to me to teach him that it was unacceptable. And that's the other end of the spectrum, where the child is instead of being able to indulge in emotional expression in an unhealthy way, the child is being told to suppress emotional expression in an unhealthy way. And again, it's back to, I think so much of what we see is just one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum, and the more we kind of show and teach and do ourselves, coming back into that still point, that midpoint of balance, the more freedom we have, the more choices.
That is a huge conversation, isn't it?
I think with hours and hours and hours of it. But yeah, it's so interesting. So I guess what and I always love our chats, Tracey. And the words and the music comes through really strongly as a theme here. Intention and attention comes through as a strong theme here, and just what animals can teach us about our more natural states before we get involved in language. There's so many. Yeah. So thank you so very, very much. And it's been a really, really cool, exciting and interesting, as always, conversation to have with you, and I look forward to the very next one.
That would be great. Always learning.
Oh, aren't we just? Every second, every day. That's brilliant. Thank you, Tracey.
All right then. See you soon.